A century ago, sailing boats were the semi-trailers of the waterways, transporting produce from port to port around Australia. One man is trying to revive this tradition, using an old sailing ketch to collect produce from Tasmania's Huon Valley to deliver to a market in Hobart. Fiona Breen reports.
Like their forebears, Huon Valley producers brave a cold, crisp autumn dawn to get their goods to the Commandy dock.
Well, that's the first into the hold. Yay! So, yeah, well done, thanks very much. We'll look after it.
In the late 19th century, the gaff-rigged cutter, the Olive May, was the valley's transport. Today, it's being loaded again.
So you're our first load of apple stick. Okay. We need some timber.
There's another piece as well.
Great. Okay. That's beautiful. Beautiful, thank you.
Of several big boat yards in New South Wales, Sean Langman has bought the old Commandy Hotel at Port Huon and transformed it. He's done the same with the 1880s built sailing ketch, the Olive May, which sits at the dock out the front of the hotel.
I've said a number of times that southern Tasmania is my spiritual home. It's where I feel I belong and I feel connected. The place speaks to me and I'm drawn to it. So to get this opportunity to take a 133-year-old sailboat down the Huon River, meet wonderful people, collect their produce, get a little insight into their life is just such a overwhelming, passionate thing to do that I really enjoy.
She's now the oldest sailing charter vessel in survey in Australia. Originally a double-ender, she worked the whole shoreline to the south of Hobart, picking up wood, apples and passengers as she sailed from port to port.
Olive May was built as a passage boat. She was a delivery boat before she was a fishing boat. They say there's been more scallops over her deck than any other fishing boat in Tasmania. Now she's back to her original roots, which is a delivery. She's now a passage boat again.
Fantastic.
What started as an off-the-cuff idea to promote his adopted home has caught on. Locals bring produce to the dock, enjoying the spirit of the venture.
I'm just so excited about the amount of goods that have turned up. We put it out there this week that it'd be nice if right at the beginning we could get some producers, and I'm overwhelmed. It's fantastic.
A competitor in numerous Sydney to Hobarts, Sean Langman recently set a new speed record for sailing between Sydney and Hobart on board the 60-foot trimaran Team Australia.
It's a really nice adventure, and I like to do as much of these adventures with my family as I can. So my son did the 29-hour sail to Hobart on the trimaran, and now my daughter's coming for a nice little 3-day sail down the Huon River.
It was a little slower on board the old sailing ketch, the Olive May, and a little colder on the Huon River. But it wasn't without its challenges.
Very interesting morning of navigation, actually, with all that fog. I was down below doing the bacon and eggs, and when I came up I didn't really recognise a little bit of shore, and we checked the compass and we're actually heading south. so that was a little bit of a slow start.
A bit of circle work and the Olive May was chugging in the right direction. Its first port of call, Heriot's Point, 15 minutes north on the river.
We're bringing over one of our oak barrels of Pinot to go up to Hobart Town. We're also loading up a case from the cellars of our old Pinot. So there's a case of old 2004 Pinot.
All right, we'll swing her over.
The fog started to lift as the Olive May continued its rounds. At the next port, a load of local honey.
This is local product, fresh and local, and honey's been an export that's always been going out of the Huon Valley for the last 150 years. It travels well, and also it's a typical product that could go interstate as well easily.
We think we can take about 2.5 tonne on her. So yeah, she carries well. We'll watch her load lines as we go. Obviously, she hasn't been immersed in the water like this for such a long time, so we might find the odd little leak that we've got to deal with. But we're looking forward to those challenges as well.
At Huonville, there was a stop for some wine and cider delivered in an old Chevy.
Crate of cider for your travels.
Fantastic, thank you.
That should sustain you through your voyage you've got coming up here.
Yeah, no, we look forward to partaking in a few of these this afternoon.
Round the corner and down the river, things were a little more in the spirit of the late 19th century.
The very jetty that we will be loading from, right outside of my home, was actually a jetty where produce was loaded 100 years ago.
Some old draft horses greeted Langman and his crew as a horse and cart made its deliveries. On the cart, crates of apples delivered to the jetty as they would have been a century ago.
G'day mate, good to see you.
Yeah, good.
There's only a couple of ports of call left and the hold is nearly full. There's potatoes, barrels of wine, bottles of wine, cider, a great variety of produce. It looks like the Huon community has really embraced this project. The mix of goods filling the hold of the sailing boat as it made its way from port to port on the Huon River is typical of the modern produce of the Huon Valley. There's still apples, but the landscape of the region has changed since the 1960s, when the industry was at its peak, employing thousands of people. Hills once lined with apple trees are now covered in vines, cherry orchards and other fruit and vegetable crops.
We had to grub out our apples because we couldn't sell enough overseas. But this where we are now picking today is where we used to have an apple orchard.
Today, the Home Hill property at Ranelagh in the Huon Valley is full of vines. It's a busy time, with picking of the Pinot Noir harvest later than normal.
Took a big gamble this year by leaving them on the vine probably a week longer than I normally would. But I think in the Huon Valley you need that extra week in cold weather to get the flavour and the slow ripening. As I said, could have picked last week, but I don't think the flavours would have been anywhere near what they are at this point in time. There's no botrytis, it's a very clean vintage. We're picking about 5.5, 6 tonnes of the hectare, which is about perfect.
It appears the gamble is paying off.
There you go, Rosemary, taste that. That's sitting at about 13.8, 14 Beaumay.
I'm going to take
good?
the whole bunch.
Whole bunch?
Mm-hmm. I'll pop them in
There's
my
probably a
pocket and
glass
take
of
them
wine
home.
there you're wasting.
At Heriot's Point, nestled on the banks of the Huon River, it's a similar story. Over 20 years, the waterside property has been transformed from apple orchards to vineyards.
I guess that reflects the changes that have happened in agriculture from the sort of 1860s and 70s on to today. There were a lot more apples in the early days, going up to Hobart and going down to Port Huon. But of course, if Tasmania had been settled by the French rather than the British, then the Pinot going up today would certainly have been going up 50, 60, 70, 80 years ago, because they would have seen the potential of this landscape for growing the very best quality cool climate wines.
A warm summer has pushed their picking out a little later too. Are you happy with the harvest?
Yeah, it's it's come up pretty well. These are sort of classic Pinot Noir bunches, and the ripening is very good. The berries are full and flavoursome, and that'll make a perfect Pinot Noir. You'll be able to taste the flavour is very concentrated in those skins, so it's almost like a almost a sultano. It's got.
The number of vineyards may be growing, but it's not taking over the apple industry yet.
Well, I think apples are still very much a signature for the Huon Valley, apples and cherries, and there's been a lot of investment in new varieties and in using those products in different ways. You see it in the cider that's now being made in the valley. But I think with wine, it's just gradually getting its footing. We need to do it step by step to make sure we concentrate on quality, we concentrate on our markets, and make sure that at sort of each step of the expansion, there's a good market that can pay a reasonable price for our fruit.
Nowadays, there are 20 main apple growers in the region, a far cry from the 1950s and 60s when there were hundreds. Back then, export ships lined the Hobart wharves to take Huon Valley apples overseas. Millions were sent to Britain and across Europe. Things changed in the 1970s when Britain joined the Common Market, now known as the European Union. Australian produce was virtually locked out, and many growers were forced to sell. The Duggan family was sending all its crops overseas. Nowadays, their market is 100% local. Working side by side at the 80-year-old apple sorter, Christine and Mark Duggan sort fruit for the local farmers markets and corner stores. They've also started making juice.
We're very fortunate. I inherited a lot of my growing skills from my father and his grandfather in the apple industry. We love growing apples. It is a perfect place in the Huon Valley to grow apples.
They farm 7 hectares of orchards with 12,500 apple trees. They've had lots of ups and downs since the 1970s, but the couple say they've turned the corner and the future of the farm is secure.
My parents, they grew 59 crops of fruit on this property, which is, I don't know if it's some type of record or not, but it's a lot of crops of fruit. And all those growing skills, techniques that Dad passed on to me would have been lost. And it's just a shame. It would have been an absolute shame.
It's not going to be lost?
It won't be lost. It will continue. It will continue, and I can see growth as well. We're planting new trees again this year.
Another 4th-generation apple grower, Andrew Smith, has also made some big changes to survive. In the late 1990s, he made the then radical decision to convert 55 hectares of orchards and 85,000 apple trees to organic production.
I was quite disillusioned with the calendar book spraying cycle, and so after a trip to Washington State in '98, I made the decision, along with my father, who together we converted to organic in 1998.
They're now one of the biggest organic fruit growers in Australia.
We have thrown $100,000 worth of chemicals away and replaced it with $500,000 worth of labour. Subsequently, we need to be at the highest price on the retail shelf.
The Smiths are also value-adding, making cider from blemished fruit.
Ultimately, we are a fresh apple business, so we're trying to do dessert apples for the supermarket chains nationally. Cider and a juice product that we do in conjunction with Juicy Isle are taking up about 20% of our apple crop currently.
Things may be changing in the Huon Valley, but as the Olive May makes its way down the Huon River and up the Don Tricasco Channel towards Hobart, there's still a strong sense of tradition. The history of the thriving agricultural area is evident throughout the journey.
It's fantastic going down the river and seeing the remnants of all the old wharves and taking your mind back to the reason why this road is all the way along the riverfront here, because this is how they traded. They had to bring all their commerce, all their produce, everything that was delivered had to go along this track to these wharves, and then under sail they go from wharf to wharf to wharf to deliver goods to Hobart.
At Hobart, the produce is unloaded from the Olive May. Producers arrive early to set up their stalls. An enthusiastic crowd soon turns up to buy their goods. The produce may have changed over the years, but it's hoped the agricultural sector will continue to be just as strong. If enthusiasm counts for anything, the producers of Tasmania's Huon Valley are thriving.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Let's be a sugar national.
With the job done, the Olive May headed back downriver. Like a horse headed for home, her captain gave her her head. Time for a bit of nautical showing off.
This is the first time in almost 80 years that the Olive May has got all her sails set. She has her traditional mizzen mast back in now with a type of sprit sail that you don't normally see in Australia. We've got a topsail set, which the Tasmanian trading catchers were famous for all around the world because they set the biggest topsails out of any boats other than the big racing class in England. And the reason why they set these sails is that, like today, it seems like there's no wind, but the wind is all up high, and these topsails take that wind and propel the boat down the river.
There's a good chance the Olive May will be seen plying the old trade routes again. All involved are keen to make the journey a regular event.